Just want to add that this global groundwater study said that if the Great Lakes are being pumped as fast as groundwater around the world is being pumped, then the Great Lakes could be bone dry in 80 years. This was the statement. I thought, now that'll be on the front page of every single newspaper in North America. Funny, I didn't see it anywhere. There was another report that came out of the U.S. Department of Agriculture last year that said that the Ogallala Aquifer, that's the aquifer that goes down the spine of the United States and provides most of the water for most of their food, plus billions of dollars of exports, will be gone in our lifetime. That was a statement made officially by the Department of Agriculture. Just an astounding statistic, or astounding statement. And I thought, now that will be on the front page of every newspaper, but I just don't know. It's just that we've got this myth of abundance and we can't get past it, or we can't get past the notion that some technology is going to fix it up for us. So what are we doing with all this? Well, we're doing all the bad stuff and worse. I have to tell you, we're now into fracking, and we have fracking fights all around the lakes. Thankfully, we've stopped it here in Ontario. We've got a full moratorium in Quebec, which is great. And you may or may not know that there's a NAFTA challenge now. An American energy company called Lone Pine is suing well, it's the Canadian government, because it's the Canadian government that signed, but because Quebec has implemented this moratorium, we now have a NAFTA challenge. So this is really important for us to understand, once again, how these trade agreements lock us into bad habits and bad practices. But the fracking is going on the American side, and when I was told by some very reputable and influential sources yesterday that their water is being shipped by train from lakes and rivers and some of them tributaries into the Great Lakes in New York State to Pennsylvania for their fracking. So we're already seeing water being moved, and we fought with Mark and others against a push to have fracking, polluted fracked water coming through the public system on Niagara Falls on the American side. But it's only a matter of time before we start to have these fights really intensely, because fracking is growing everywhere. We have new mining operations opened up on the entire American side of the Great Lakes. A huge copper and ore find has been opened up, and operations are proceeding. A lot of them foreign companies, a lot of them Canadians, of course. Mark talked about the nuclear waste shipments and the deep geological deposits in terms of nuclear waste. We're now seeing that the Great Lakes are becoming a kind of new frontier for an energy grid for Alberta tar sands. And we all know about the Keystone Pipeline, we all know about the fight. I think I'm the only person in the world who thinks Obama may say no to it, but I stand alone and probably wrong. But people may not know that there is another pipeline called the Alberta Clipper that's already taking bitumen, which is the dirtiest oil on earth, and it's taking it around the Great Lakes on the American side to 17 refineries where it is being refined. So even if we do stop the Keystone, the project is still happening. And they're talking in Superior, Wisconsin, of a proposed crude oil transfer dock where the crude oil would come in by pipeline. They already do some refining in Superior, but they would then send it out on barges and ships and ship it back around the lake, including back to Ontario. I mean, think of anything more insane if you can. Already almost 4 million tons of oil and gas products are shipped on the lakes every year, and of course a lot of this is also being shipped by train. So this bitumen is coming in around and under our lakes, and it's happening fast. And of course Mark talked about the Harper War on Fresh Water, and I won't repeat it except to say that this is the most dangerous, anti-environmental, anti-democratic, anti-human rights government we have ever had in this country, and it is absolutely appalling that he's getting away with what he's getting away with. And we have to fight the Harper government and the Harper agenda very quickly and very hard. Everywhere I go around the world, people say, how could you have a government that's doing this? How could you have a government that voted against the right to water, or abstained in the right to water, that votes against stopping asbestos, the trade in asbestos, or votes against stopping deep water trawling fishing that's killing so many species? How could you have a government doing this? And how could we have a government that has put the vast majority of our lakes and rivers in absolute danger? Any pipeline now can go over most of our lakes and rivers, carrying whatever crude is in it, absolutely unprotected. So it keeps me up at night. I wake up and I eat nails for breakfast to get myself the iron I need. And I do think there's a big ray of hope in the Ontario Great Lakes Protection Act. I like very much the Guardian Council idea, but it is not enough, and it is simply not enough when we understand all of the various threats all over the place. So what are we all thinking when this happens? Well, I think there are three problems. One is what I talked about, this myth of abundance, this notion that water is here for our pleasure, convenience, and profit, and we can do whatever we want with it. I think that's a very modern concept in water, and it started with the tap, when you could turn on a tap and get water and not think about going to get it from somewhere, or pulling it up from a well, or going to the river and bringing it up. There's just a notion that it comes from somewhere else, and it's absolutely inexhaustible, and we're removed from water because of our modern technologies. The second is that there are too many jurisdictions. There are 2 countries, there are 8 states, there are 2 provinces, many municipalities, many First Nations communities around the lakes, with varying degrees of laws, enforcement, funding, defunding in our case, and so we don't have a concept of the lakes as a basin or as a kind of one watershed. But the third is, and I think this is the most important, is that we have what I call dueling visions of the lakes. One is the vision that we in this room would have, which is these lakes are the living element, or the most essential element of a living ecosystem that gives us life, and the vision that they're just a great big dollar sign, that they're essential for the economic engine that this region has become. And if the Great Lakes area were to become a country, we would have the second biggest economy in the world, second only to the US economy. So we see it as a dumping ground. We see it as a dollar sign. I mean, why I'm a little nervous about the government's new legislation, or its new proposed legislation on the Great Lakes, where some of it looks really good, and we've read it and looked over it carefully. I also know that they're talking on the other side about what they call the blue economy, which is where you use your lakes and your water resources to bring industry to you. And so those are the dueling visions, and they exist right within the current Ontario government. And it's really clear. It's clear to me that it's unclear to them which side is going to win. Although I have to give Premier Wynne a great big thumbs up for saving the experimental lakes area. So what we need is a new water ethic. We need what Mark just called a culture of respect for water, and we need to put water and protection and conservation of water, restoration of watersheds at the very center of our lives. This has to be a fundamental change. All policy, trade policy, food policy, energy policy, urban planning, everything we do has to take into account water. If we did, we would design cities differently. We would not pave over streams and rivers. We would keep them alive. We would know that the wetlands are the kidneys of our water, and we would protect and restore wetlands. You would never take a wetland down that you did not have to. You would never build we'd never do the raising of trees and so on for a suburb. We would build around water. What would trade policy look like if we had to take into account the destruction of water, the loss of water in our trade policy, and the notion of the more stuff we're trading, the more global, the faster it grows, the better it is. If we had to take into account the environmental footprint generally, but specifically on water, it would be a completely different story. And we need to, I offer the notion that we have to be more humble about water and more deeply respectful. I think we've lost a sense of reverence for water. I work with a colleague who calls what we do with water modern water, that we've seen water as something as a conquest, and he actually quotes somebody who was an advisor to Roosevelt on the Hoover Dam. This is when they started the building of these mighty dams, who said, if America is going to be great, we have the conquest of water is a building block. So we actually talked about you have to conquer water. My colleague who wrote this, Jamie Linton, says that, with this vision of modern water, when you look at a river, you don't see a beautiful flowing river, you see hydropower, you see money, right? And he says we then exported that notion of water being here for a certain kind of industrial development to the global south, and he calls that imperial water. And he says that what happened with imperial water is that we sent our engineers and our experts in, and they absolutely, in many cases, we overrode local indigenous knowledge that is now having to be rediscovered, because that's the only way that people can bring back rain, can bring back watersheds once they're destroyed. We have to go to the old methods.